Hello everybody, welcome to La Bay, Vietnam. I'm staying at an Airbnb at the moment, which is floating. It's like a floating island, so it's been very peaceful, very tranquil for the last couple of days. There are sometimes cruise ships that pass, so you may see one passing. But we've spent some time kayaking, visiting some lagoons, and just overall having a very peaceful time in this lovely environment. We're very close to Halong Bay, if anyone has been there. So yes, just having a lovely time in Vietnam, and then I go back to Bali tomorrow, so I'm really excited to go back home. So on to this video. This is going to be my Women's Prize predictions video. I love following the Women's Prize. It's one of the ones I look forward to the most out of the year. I also like the Booker and the International Booker, but the Women's Prize, because I think it's so much longer, it's 16 books, I feel like you can really get your teeth into at least a few of those, even if you don't love the entire list. So I've picked out I think 16 here, but I also wanted to briefly mention before I start that there are quite a few big authors with books that are eligible for this prize this year, so I wanted to put them up here because whilst they won't all be nominated, I feel like at least a few will be. But I feel, especially last year when the Women's Prize lent more towards debut authors and more obscure authors that no one had really ever heard of, I feel like they may do that again, and they may like that sort of trend where they're not just jumping on the bandwagon, but they are like trend setting. So I think there will be some big authors and maybe some big name books that have had prize attention in the last 12 months, like Night Crawling, which was on the Booker long list. That may be on this year's long list for the women's, and also The Rabbit Hutch, which I think won the Pulitzer or the National Book Award, one of those two American prizes. So I feel like that could also be on the list. But apart from that, I think they will potentially, hopefully, go for one of the more of the books that I've chosen. So I also wanted to mention some books that, if I was a judge, I would probably want to long list, but I don't necessarily think will have mass appeal, and so potentially won't be put on something like the Women's Prize. One of them was Latvona by Tessa Moshfegh, which I read a couple of weeks ago and absolutely loved. And I know it's very much a Marmite book. Some people loved it, some people hated it, but I loved it. I don't feel like the Women's Prize will go for it because I feel like it's quite a controversial one. Anyone who's read it will probably know the scene that I'm talking about. I'm really not sure if that scene is something that the Women's Prize, who I feel veer more towards the commercial side of fiction, would want to go, here, everybody go and read this book with this really weird scene in it. But I thought it was great. I do really like historical fiction, so it was in my wheelhouse for that regard as well. Another one that I personally would nominate is True Biz, which I also read this month. I had a bit of an absolute banger of a month in this January, which is a kind of a spoiler for my wrap up coming next week. True Biz is set in a deaf school and is about the various challenges and complications that have arisen from the hearing community trying to, I guess, suppress and make life more difficult than it needs to be for the deaf community, and especially deaf kids, and the various surgeries and school funding availability and things like that. And it also, whilst being a novel, it also has at the end of the chapters historical details and linguistic details about how you actually perform sign language, which I found fascinating. So I would also nominate that book, as well as have to put Jessica Andrews on here as well as one that I would nominate. Her book Milk Teeth is eligible, so I would, but again I don't think the Women's Prize will necessarily go for it because they didn't snap up her first novel Saltwater, so potentially she's just not vibing somehow with the Women's Prize. But on to the books that I think will be on the long list. The first book I wanted to put on is called The Whalebone Theater, which is an interwar coming-of-age family saga. And I mean, that's all the things that I love. So even if it's not on there, I will be reading that book and probably a lot of these books. The next one is Thrust. The little synopsis here says, as rising waters and an encroaching police state endanger her life and family, a girl with the gifts of a carrier travels through water and time to rescue vulnerable figures from the margins of history. I mean, that sounds great for several reasons. I feel like the police state is something that's coming up in not only our contemporary times today, the issues we're having with state violence and the police, but it also speaks to the Women's Prize love last year for magical realism, and that is magical realism, and so I feel like that could be a good contender. There's also There Are More Things, which has themes of sisterhood, queerness and revolution, all of which are important topics for women, and so a Women's Prize would celebrate those sorts of themes. And so there's another book along the same lines as Thrust, but it's called Memphis, and it's about intergenerational Southern Black family. It's a saga, and it's about police brutality. So I feel like in the wake of all the horrific news that has been coming out lately, and for actually the last 12 months to 2 years, and I think they'll be highlighting this issue because yes, police brutality, we see, especially in the most recent case, it's police brutality is happening to a man, but that man has a mother, a sister, a wife, a daughter. It has such a knock-on effect to women and community as a whole that I feel like the Women's Prize would want to be highlighting something like police brutality. And so we also have Remarkably Bright Creatures, which is very light. It's magical realism. It's called it's been labelled as charming. It's about a widow and her sort of not pottering about, but just having I just feel like it's going to be cosy and charming, so I'm looking forward to reading that regardless. The next one is Horse by Geraldine Brooks. Now, Geraldine Brooks is a big author, big name, and I'm looking forward to reading this book regardless of whether it makes the long list or not. But it's celebrating themes of art and science, privilege and enslavement, so I feel like I can't overlook Geraldine Brooks for this long list. I feel like she is a shoo-in to get a spot on this list. The next book is The Force of Such Beauty, a testament to the way in which real life power structures around the world ultimately rest on the subjugation of women's bodies. So again, this would be a very appropriate theme for the Women's Prize to pick up and nominate. The next one is Wild Geese. The themes are trans women, migration and alienation. So I feel like women not only migrating through time and space, but also migrating through their own identity. I feel like those would be very apt themes for our contemporary times, and so why not put that on the long list this year. The next one is The Need, which is a thriller, and I feel like the Women's Prize do tend to have the odd genre novel, and so this would be potentially their genre novel this year. It has had a mixed reaction, I must admit, but it would be in the popular commercial side of things, and so the Women's Prize do tend to enjoy and promote that as well because they have such a wide readership. They want things that are going to sell, so I feel like this would sell as a thriller on motherhood. So I think it would work on this long list. There are 3 Greek myth retellings that are eligible for this year's prize. These are the 3, and so I feel like one of them is going to be on the list. I'm not sure which one. I don't really mind which one because I probably won't be reading it anyway, so I think one of these will take one spot. Then the next one is an interesting one, and possibly the one that I am most looking forward to on this list, and it's called They're Going to Love You, and it's the themes are ballet meets the AIDS crisis, and I feel like that's going to be quite an interesting kind of overlap. So I think it's set in New York. The woman is the ballerina, and I think it's her father who is gay and has AIDS. I don't have the description here, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And I remember reading the summary for it and going, I need to read that book. So if I've got that slightly wrong, I'll just write here the accurate version. But I think that's the one that I'm most excited to pick up on this list. That and probably Geraldine Brooks. The next one is called The Nursery, and it's the themes of postpartum identity and depression. I feel like there's been a lot of emphasis in recent years trying to highlight the challenges and the almost shock of the fourth trimester for women in pregnancy, where postpartum depression comes up, along with a huge amount of physical change in their bodies, and it's not really talked about or explained, and it comes as a shock because no one has prepared them for this, what is going to happen in their lives, mentally, physically, emotionally, as well as dealing with a new baby and the shift in dynamic that happens to every relationship in your life. So yeah, I feel like this is the Women's Prize with women's issues, and this is a women's issue that has been coming up and is being spoken about more and more as people are looking for help and advice and support from the women around them and the community in dealing with this huge change. So I think that could be on there. The next one is called Mercy Street, and this is about a women's clinic in the US, and it's an abortion clinic, and so I feel like it will certainly be on the table for discussion at the Women's Prize because of the laws that have been passed in America this year, and how wrong they are. So I feel like this book should be a contender just for its importance in our kind of contemporary news and our contemporary world. So that I think will be on there. The next one is another kind of magical realism, Chinese folklore, historical fiction one, which I'm really looking forward to reading, called Four Treasures of the Sky. And this is about a little girl who is kidnapped and taken from China to the US. So I feel like that will be quite nice. I'm kind of getting Build Your House Around My Body vibes from it, so I feel like that could be a hit, could be a similar, because I feel like I didn't really hear anything bad about Build Your House Around My Body last year, so I feel like everyone's would quite like this one. Right, we're down to the last two, so we're almost there. The last, another one is No Hard Feelings, which is an Australian novel, and it's been compared to Sally Rooney, which I feel like is kind of like a death sentence at this point to the author, who is compared to Sally. Like, whose publicist would say this is the next Sally Rooney? Because you're not going to be the next Sally Rooney. Like, be your own person, that's absolutely fine. But it has unfortunately been compared to normal people. So I'm not sure, have we had enough depressed woman moving? Have we had enough millennial, sad woman, relationship drama? Probably not. We could probably have another one. So this could be on the list. Although I don't feel like the Women's Prize have highlighted an Australian author. I can't think of an Australian author that they've highlighted. So potentially they won't be looking at this one. Maybe it's not even been submitted and put forward, because we don't know which books, even though they're eligible, we don't necessarily know who's been put forward for the prize. So The last book on the list is one that I think will be a bit of a romp, a bit of a laugh, and it's called Ginger and Me, and it's about a coming of age female friendship with a kind of mystery vibe as well, and I think that sounds absolutely great. I'm really looking forward to reading that. The front cover is of this woman sort of like laughing and running down the street, and I just feel like if that's the vibe, I'm there for it. I want to read that book. So these are my predictions. A lot of them I want to read regardless. And as I say, there are three that I personally, if I was a judge, I'd be putting forward: Latvona, Milk Teeth, and True Biz. But I would be surprised, but also, you know, really happy if they were on there. And then, as I say, I think there'll be some big name authors making the list as well. Probably Barbara Kingsolver, probably Maggie O'Farrell, but who knows? So I'm definitely getting excited, and when the long list is released, whether I read some of them or none of them, it will be exciting to see what's on the list. So it's bye from me in Vietnam, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.